I will actually give it right over to Dr. Mishra. She is bringing joy to your work through improved scientific communication, and you can start whenever you'd like to. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So I am a clinical professor of medicine and work in pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine at the VA. But at the university, I am involved with both student and resident teaching. And I'm excited that my Art of Medicine curriculum that focuses on students seeing themselves as human and seeing the humanity in their patients is starting in July 2024. So I know those of you who are here have had a long day. So it is important that we take a nice deep breath. And after that, I just want to see if you're here just physically or mindfully with full awareness. I'm going to show you a little video and pay attention.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Right, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
Why not?
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you? Action. Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Right, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
All right. Oops, sorry. So my first question to you is, how aware were you? How many of you did notice those changes happening on the video?
I confess none. None of them.
Just the flowers. I just noticed the flowers were different. I was like, wasn't like that, but nothing else I noticed.
So it's just a reminder to us that, how many of you felt that you've started the engine, reached a destination, and have had no recollection of driving? Many of us, right? We shouldn't live life that way. It is important that we are fully aware. So I hope for the rest of the presentation, I do get your attention and awareness. And I hope we are able to talk about what would be some ways to really enhance your presentations and capture the interest of your audience, have fun communicating the incredible work that you're doing, and focus also in bringing joy, because we know burnout is a huge problem. The first thing is to really pay attention to your audience. If they're interested, teach them. When they don't want to be there, involve them. And if they are uninterested, entertain them. And if they're missing, just hope that some of them will watch it asynchronously on video. So the first thing is to meet the needs of your audience. You need to tune in to the FM station, which is WIIFM. How many of you are aware of that term?
I've not heard of it.
Well, it stands for what is in it for me. So very important that you have a hook, limited number of points, and a strong closing statement in summary. Make it a performance. And remember that your presentation skills are as important as your message, something that we tend to forget, especially when we are passionate about a subject and we feel that everybody should know about it or everybody already knows about most of it. So focus on the skills as well as the matter. Because if you don't, here's another video to show you what can happen.
Have to alleviate the effects of the anyone, Great Depression, passed the anyone, the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics, voodoo economics.
All right. So again, the problem with Zoom, especially if you don't have your cameras on, that I can't even know how many of you have fallen asleep. But I think it is the job of the presenter to engage your audience, right? But in order to engage your audience is also to know who your audience is. So that said, given that you're a small group, we could just unmute ourselves, and if you could just introduce yourself. Catherine, do you want to start?
Absolutely. My name is Catherine Sedota. I am the Educational Workforce Specialist for the CTSI, and I am a docent at the Buffalo Zoo and frequently have walked around the zoo with a 5-foot snake around my arm.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Diane.
I'm Diane Schwartz. I am a Research Associate Professor of Biomedical Informatics at the Jacobs School.
Thank you, Diane. Liz?
I'm Liz Bangert. I am a Team Science Coordinator, also for the Clinical and Translational Science Institute. I help coordinate these workshops as well.
Thanks, Liz. Arvin?
And I'm Armin St. George. I'm a business development at an AI company and heavily engaged in research. So I'm always looking at ways to motivate the emotional responses in folks. And that's why I'm really interested in what you're presenting here. And you had, even though I didn't have my camera on, you had me laughing. So you brought out that smile.
Thanks, Armin. Cedric? If I'm pronouncing your name right.
No, yeah, you got it right. I'm Cedric Ball. I'm the administrator for the Division of Hematology Oncology. And I'm just sort of trying to gather as many skills as I can when it comes to both patient care clinically and lab research.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for sharing. And again, I'm a strong believer in really engaging with your head, hands, and heart. And there's certain traits and skills that are important to embody. And as a presenter, it is important to engender trust. And some of the trust comes with who you present yourself as. How willing are you to be vulnerable? How willing you're to be curious? And also important is to be a generous listener.
Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you? Over. We are thinking. We are thinking. Hello? This is the German Coast Guard. What are you thinking about?
So, speaking is important, but more important is listening, where thinking can turn into thinking, and lives can be at stake. I think one of the things that we are thinking about nowadays, especially in the healthcare field, let's just kind of tackle the elephant in the room, which is burnout. And some of it starts with value conflict, things that you signed up for and what you actually see may be different, leading to moral distress. And if you keep having these episodes of moral distress, that can build up to a moral injury. And finally, that can culminate in burnout. And, we in US lose about 400 physicians each year because they took their life. That's more than 2 medical school classes. So something needs to change, and we need to bring joy into our workplace. So I'm sure you all are familiar with what burnout is. It was, but do you know how the term burnout was coined? Why is it called burned out when you have emotional, physical, I've added the spiritual exhaustion, cynicism, low feeling of personal and professional accomplishment? The term actually was coined by Freudenberger, who was a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor in New York City, who found that the term was really from addicts in the streets of New York who had a cigarette burning, and it kept burning, and they weren't even aware when it was down to its stop. So that's where the burnout, disengagement term came out. Christina Maslach, who's created the burnout inventory to measure burnout, calls it an erosion of the soul caused by deterioration of one's values, dignity, spirit, and will. And I think that summarizes it well. Why does it happen? It's a myriad of causes: stressful environment, challenging routines, long working hours, ethical issues, the loss of connection, value conflict, sleep deprivation, not having an adequate support system, insufficient reward, or that lack of control. It is an individual response to a systemic problem. So you cannot yoga away burnout. It's something where it's the system that causes an individual to respond this way. I'll share a poem that talks about my own burnout. So I went back to work 3 weeks after my daughter was born. And I was rounding in the ICU, having fun playing with ventilators, when suddenly I realized that my white coat was dripping. And it struck me that I had forgotten that I had given birth to my beautiful daughter, Nina. And that led to a whole snowball of emotions where I felt, if I can't remember something that's so near and dear to me, am I even capable of taking care of patients? And so I walked into my office, picked up the phone, told my husband, I'm quitting. He stopped for a few minutes and said, okay. And then I come home, and my son, who is 14 and a half years older than my daughter, was livid. He said, how can you quit? You love your job too much. And I responded saying, I wasn't there for you, so you don't want me to be there for Nina. And he said, you were there. And I, more than I needed you to be. And then fast forward to the pandemic, and I was, these were uncertain times. I saw more death than I had in my 30 years in this profession. And I walk into this room with my hair, my unruly hair in a cap, I had a mask and a pepper mask on top, and gown and gloves. And I walk in, and this patient who's on a high flow oxygen says, "Hey, it's Dr. Mishra." And I said, "How on earth did you recognize me?" And he said, "Well, you can't hide the kindness in your eyes. That one statement healed me." And I'll share a poem that's about this experience. Stress was my morning meal. This burnout, though, different, disconnected, like driving a familiar road for moments without realizing I was not really there. I am a burnout survivor. 20 years my journey, the front of my crisp white coat dripped with my own milk, reminding me, but how could I have forgotten? I need to be here for her. I was not there for him. But you were there for me, he said, a gift, one I could not receive. I was not me, but an imposter. Clad in protection from toe to head, he called me by my name, my first patient of the plague. But how can you recognize me? I said, with my face hidden. I can always recognize your kind eyes, he said. A gift. I receive it. I'm healed by it. I am a burnout survivor. So burnout at its core is really that impaired ability to experience joy. And it is contagious. You know, we have these stress sprinklers around, and I'm sure you've encountered them on your team. And it kind of sucks the joy out of your day. So it is important that instead of being, succumbing to that, you become a joy spreader. So I'll share some tools to bring joy to your work. And for me, it was really changing my thoughts. Our thoughts create our reality. So changing my thoughts changed my world. Believing that burnout is out of my control, I try to make it in my control. And I love Brene Brown, and she says, I'm imperfect and vulnerable, but I'm also brave, worthy of love and belonging. And Viktor Frankl, talked about how everything can be taken from a person, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And I think using some of these tools helped me really find joy. I'll start off with improv, because improv was one way, and some of the principles of improv, the yes and versus the yes but, the empathy and spontaneity that comes with it, active listening, making your partner look insanely good is another trait that helps, and allowing ourselves to fail and not be afraid to make mistakes and just relax and have fun. People who are presenting, so this is, I forget where I read it, but it said that 80% of people who are there, at a wake would rather be there in the casket than reading the eulogy. So that's how frightening it is to be speaking. But it is important to be creative, right? Creativity is defined as the ability to transcend traditional ideas and rules and patterns and create something that is meaningful, and using the divergent and convergent thinking deliberately. In summary, creativity is intelligence having fun. And I can tell you, when I asked medical students to create a graphic, and this is something they did in 5 minutes, of what their ideal physician would look like, it was really fascinating, but also depressing how many of them created individual with capes and this unhealthy pursuit for perfectionism. And this holds true even when you're presenting. Being a recovering perfectionist, I can tell you that's the best thing I did was to let go of that unhealthy perfectionism. And important to kind of ignite our innate creativity. We all are creative. Um, I'm also a huge believer in appreciative inquiry, which essentially is a method of thinking where you don't go about searching for problems, because if you do, you'll find them, but rather looking for what is best, learning from it, and magnifying that. A neat example would be, iPhones and iPads weren't problems to be solved. They were visions that led to a change in our life. So it is important that we look at things in an asset-based versus a deficit-focused way. And this can change, the slight frame shift can change how much joy you get out of your work. And then the most important is the art of making time stand still with mindfulness, paying attention to what's happening with an attitude of curiosity and kindness. And mindfulness is not about sitting cross-legged and meditating. It's about these little mindful moments and being open to the joy that you can receive. I learned the hard way that multitasking doesn't work. You really need to focus on what you're doing. The other important part is managing our anxiety. We all tend to be negatively wired, where we are closed, we are defensive, we are committed to being right. And part of it comes from our experiences from childhood. Instead, we need to kind of move above the line where we are open, where we are curious, where we are committed to learning. And we can truly empower ourselves with that endeavor. The next is storytelling. Stories are powerful. Stories help us truly communicate and learn. So the bottom line is, if you've got something to say and you know it is important, but you're having trouble boiling it down to its core, therefore you need a framework. And I'll introduce you to the ABT and but therefore framework using a video.
And I backed up the server and I reset the thrusters and I'm thinking of recording a video. And Houston, are you there?
Okay, you just bored someone. But it doesn't have to happen. There's this age-old thing called stories. It has a structure we're programmed to understand. You may have heard this from all the recent books and people talking about the power of story, and yet you may still be wondering how. Here's your answer. The ABT. It's the universal narrative template. And, but, and therefore. It goes back to the Greeks, to Hegel the philosopher, and all the way up to the creators of South Park. Every good story fits this template. Setup, twist, punchline. That's what comics call it. Situation, conflict, resolution. That's what MBAs call it. And guess who's used it? Abe Lincoln with the Gettysburg Address. And Watson and Crick when they reported the structure of DNA. Your favorite movies fall into the ABT. I could tell you the story of a little girl on a farm in Kansas and her life is boring, but then one day a tornado takes her to the land of Oz. Therefore, she must find her way home. Or a doctor could tell you your pulse is fine and your blood pressure is normal, but she can hear a wheeze in your lungs. Therefore, she's going to order some tests. You've heard of the elevator pitch, telling your whole story in a short elevator ride. The ABT is the narrative structure that guarantees what you say is both concise and compelling.
Well, I'm annoyed that guy fell asleep, and I have to call him back, but the ABT might help. Therefore, I'm gonna give it a shot.
All right, so you heard from me about tools that I use to help me truly find joy. And I think, again, I said that before, but I hope that you don't end up being stress sprinklers, but truly joy spreaders. I'll give you one example of how important scientific communication is, using COVID as an example. So this is not me, but Andy Slavitt, who said that the science side of COVID gets an A grade because the scientists did a heroic work. But as far as communicating the science is concerned, the grade is a D minus to an F. So despite all the hard work, we failed the public. And organizations then came together to create COVID-19 communication toolkit, but it was a little too late, right? We had lost people. You cannot undie people, right? So there is need for effective scientific communication because science is fascinating because it's an attempt to understand the world. And when we confront a new challenge, a pandemic or your own project, communication skills are extremely important. Again, one of the biggest roles of communication is that it's an antidote to fear, because the unknown is always fear generating. The fewer people who are in the dark, the better off everyone is. So the goal is to turn that data into information, the information into knowledge, and finally the knowledge into wisdom. But also importantly, have fun doing it instead of being, stressed out about it. So it is important to kind of get rid of that expert hat, but come to it with the enthusiasm of a beginner's mind and be super communicators and agents of change. First step is to show your audience why that information is important. Take your complex concepts, turn them into bite-sized building blocks, humanize your information. Use analogies and metaphors and stories. You could use the and, but, and therefore format. And it is important that we sometimes lead with the conclusion. And communication is a two-way street. You have to be a good listener in order to be a good communicator. And make sure your body language also conveys that you are fully attentive. So now I have done my talking and I want to hear from each of you. Given that, I don't know, it's a small group, but still, let's put you into breakout rooms where you can talk about your research in non-technical terms, avoid jargon, simplify your ideas, and employ anecdotes. The message is as important as the audience and the speaker. And that's something that is important to remember. Also, practice helps. And I love Billie Jean King's statement saying champions keep playing until they get it right. So we will practice. Also important is that you inoculate yourself against jargons, especially when we get comfortable in a field, we start using abbreviations, and it is important that you assume that people don't know what that stands for. It is better to simplify it, although simplifying it does not mean dumbing it down. It just means clarifying it. So make sure that your presentation is organized, have a hook, use a limited number of points, have a strong in summary, make it a performance, and remember that your presentation skills are as important as your message. That said, Catherine, do you want to send people into breakout rooms?
You and I are not going to be in a room though. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Right, then I have definitely 2 rooms ready to go, and I'm going to start them now. Do you want them for about 5 minutes? How long are you looking for?
You know what? Depending upon what time is it, why don't we give about 10 minutes?
Absolutely, we can do 10 minutes. I'm going to
Because it'll be 5 minutes each. Each person shares.
Absolutely, absolutely. 10 minutes. So we will be back here approximately at 4:45, and I will give you a 1-minute warning. So I'm going to open the rooms now.
So welcome everyone. And I think I just want to first acknowledge that I missed the chat early on. So again, thank you, Armin, for your kind comment. And Cedric, I totally agree with you. Storyboards are wonderful. Would love to hear about your first book. So that means there are many other books.
Hopefully, I'm working on finishing my second currently. I'm looking at a publication date of probably November or December.
Best of luck for that. So seeing how reluctant at least some of you were to leave your breakout rooms, I hope we get some insight. And what we'll do is we'll flip it a little. So each of you will tell us about your partner's work, if that's okay with you. Is that all right?
Yes.
Sure.
All right. So who'd like to go first?
Well, I can go first. I'll tell you about Armin. Armin, I'm not sure. I kind of suspected that you might be Canadian, but you never really did say that. So I don't know.
No, but I happen to have lived there for many years.
Okay,
But
maybe that's why. Anyway, Armin told me about the work he's been doing in using virtual reality, and most recently adding on to that artificial intelligence in some formats to help people who are experiencing either memory issues, seniors who may be in a nursing home setting, who have really lost touch with reality. So this is virtual reality to bring them back into reality. And the success they're having and how positively people have responded to this approach, and how in the most recent iteration, how artificial intelligence is starting to be used to explore new ways of utilizing perhaps virtual reality or other kinds of interventions to help people who are elderly and disabled in a variety of different ways. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Diane. And I have had a sort of sneak peek into Armin's work. So it's just so fascinating. And Armin, you'd be pleased to know that last week I was in Boston presenting at the American College of Physicians conference, and Dr. Eric Topol was one of the speakers who talked about artificial intelligence in medicine and kind of referred to his book, Deep Medicine. And it was just fascinating. I had never imagined that I would be able to experience this in my lifetime. So again, thank you for your work. Would you like to add to what Diane shared, or did she capture the work?
She captured it much more succinctly than I, because I took up most of our time in the room talking about my interests and what I'm doing, and didn't give her enough time to share what she's doing. But one thing I learned was her background in bioinformatics, and she was starting to explain what she is doing there. But also I got her passion for teaching and her love of learning. And it was I'm really intrigued, and we were just getting into, she was defining the bioinformatics and what they're doing there and what it is about, that our conversation will be continued.
Thank you, Armin. Diane, would you like to share your work?
Well, I was just going to talk about how I love to use stories to teach, and much like you do, Dr. Mishra, because I tried to help people who have selected to study biomedical informatics understand the depth and scope of the field, because it is so different, and it's very hard for people to really sort of climb on board and fully understand what the potential is and how exciting it can be to get involved in a field that really is still evolving. So that's about it. That's fine.
Thank you, Diane. So Liz and Cedric, you all decide who wants to go first.
I believe I'll go first.
Partners work.
Yeah. So Liz is, as some of you may already know, working on some research involving teamwork and collaboration at the institutional level. So there's tests on a bunch of different definitions of the interdisciplinary collaborations and how those contribute to greater understanding of complex problems.
Awesome. Thank you. Liz, does that capture it?
Yes, he did a great job at succinctly capturing my work as well. And I will say that Cedric shared with me that he does administrative work in, I believe, hematology oncology. And he works with Dr. Roberto Pili and Remy Adeleo Gala at the Jacobs School. And he also went on to say that, that he published his first book on the side. It is similar to D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy novels, and he is working on the next. He's almost done. He's looking forward to publishing that. And I'll give him a plug. It's on Amazon. It's doing well. That is what he shared with me.
Thank you so much for sharing, and congratulations on the book. And Bill, if you could put the link in the chat, that would be great. And it is, I'm quoting Rumi here, who says, "You're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop." We all have value and we matter. And the world needs better scientific communicators. So again, thank you for being here and also listening to my journey of using creativity, improv, appreciative inquiry, narrative reflection, and mindfulness to bring joy. It is important that we are assertive, clear, authentic, and open-minded, that we focus on our audience and not on ourselves, that we are active listeners, that we embrace our anxiety. And again, when it comes to presentations, it's important to make eye contact, to use positive body language, not be sort of closed off, but have an open stance, not just have a smile on your face, but also in your voice. Use stories to illustrate the ideas. We can use the ABT framework. And above all, be a joyful, super communicator. That said, I'm sort of happy to take any questions and would love your feedback. That's my email and my cell phone number to keep these conversations going. And I think I gave you 30 minutes back in your life because we're supposed to go on till 5:30, and it's it's late in the day. So if you all don't have any objections, we can stop there. But I'm really open to any questions that you have.